Welcome, everyone. It's April the 21st, 2025. Tonight on Winnipeg Research UFO and Researchers Group on Meetup has a couple of people with us in our genre. Grant Cameron is going to be our interviewer, and Whitley Streiber is going to be our guest. They both are renowned in the genre that we're dabbling in here, and from everything from consciousness to music from Grant's perspective, at least. I'd like to introduce first Grant Cameron, and maybe you could introduce Whitney.
It's Whitnell, by the way, just so that we get that straight.
What's that? Repeat again, Whitley.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, it's Whitley with an L.
Whitley.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Beautiful. Well, we thank everybody who showed up there. Whitley has gathered quite an audience here, and he's most famous for the book Communion, going back to the mid to late 80s. And the book sold, I looked it up on AI. I'm a big AI guy now. It said 2 million copies. I don't know if that's true. And I think you got a couple 100,000 letters. And that was in the day, as we were talking, where they actually had to write the letter. There was no such thing as the internet. There was no such thing as email and text and all this kind of stuff. You actually receive piles and piles and piles and piles of letters that are now at the Rice University. So maybe we can start with you giving your background, your website, not your website, your podcast, and the books you've written. You've written a lot of books through the years. Maybe give us that as a sort of a general background.
Okay, well, I don't know where to start. At my age, you've got a lot of background. So I'm gonna but you should know that, Grant. Excuse me, I'm gonna cull it a little bit. I was born. I don't know, let me do this. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I'm born. Anyone who knows Dickens, what's that ringing, that bell?
That's
I think
people
it's
getting admitted in.
People coming
good,
in.
Good. I'm glad it is, because if I was hoping it didn't have something to do with me, and I'm glad it doesn't.
We're getting a full house here.
I lived a strange life as a child, most of which I had completely forgotten, when in 1985, and right the day after Christmas, the night after Christmas, I should say, I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded by gigantic bugs. And of course, I thought, being a horror novelist at the time, or had been one before that, a wonderful dream. Perhaps I can have something to write about. I'm going to go ahead and wake up now, because this is really scary. And that didn't work. And that got me started screaming, because I couldn't rise out of the little cot I was on, and I could not make this go away. I couldn't make my bed come back up around me. I wasn't in my bed. And soon this mechanical voice starts up going, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" And it goes on and on like that. And it's not in Communion, but a neighbor of mine he told me a year later, he was driving home that night at about 2 o'clock in the morning from a post-Christmas party with his wife, and they saw what they thought was the Goodyear blimp in a field near our houses, and a field I have subsequently walked many times, of course. He said to me, he came up to the house with a copy of the book in his hand, and he said, "Whitley, I've got something I've got to tell you, and I'm embarrassed about this, but the truth is, my wife, and I'm not going to say their names, saw this happen." And I said, "What do you mean?" Wishing he had told me before I wrote the book. Could at least said there was a witness, but it was too late now. And he told me that they were driving home. They saw what they thought was the Goodyear blimp in the field. It was snowy, but he got out. He was a former state trooper, and felt like he ought to go see what was going on, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Goodyear blimp certainly didn't belong in any field around our houses, or any field for that matter. And he's walking toward it, and he begins to hear screaming. So he's pushing his way through the snow as fast as he can. And suddenly lights come on all over it, and it starts to make a growling noise and moves toward him. In the car behind him, his wife starts screaming at him to get out of there. And he decides that would be a good idea. And he turns around and runs. And they get back, he gets back in the car and they drive home. And he said, Whitley, I just feel so ashamed that I didn't try to help you. I said to him, listen, I think it's probably a good idea that you didn't try to help me. I don't have any idea what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been good, because whatever happened is these little cats are as tough as nails. And so that's where I am now. I've subsequently, I got into the idea of, they were real. I didn't like what they'd done to me. God knows I was assaulted. But I'm not going to just sit there. Something incredible happened to me, and I started going out in the woods again to try to get them to come back so that I could have some kind of understanding of what the hell they were. And that began what is now a lifelong relationship for all these years. And I've learned a great deal about them. They did come back. I wish I could say, we sat down across a table and talked. It ain't like that at all in any way whatsoever. But they are real. And they are here. And they are in some way that perhaps we don't fully understand, interested in us.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about we're happy that you're here because our group started off and it was called Winnipeg Experiencers Group. And you and I have had this discussion before, that even though there's a lot in the media about the UFO phenomena, the experiencer is still cut out of the program, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, in terms of
Sure.
your experience with all the headlines and where you've been sort of ostracized, even though I think your book really set a whole new, it's like almost like the 2017 New York Times article. Like everything shifted when people saw the cover of that book.
Yeah. Well, the book initiated contact, and the people in power and the people in authority do not wish to cede their power to some doofus like me, basically. And so they would like to pretend that me and all the other experiences, of whom you know many, and who are many here, do not even exist. And the Congress goes on talking about NHI and UAP, but not the relationship we have with NHI and UAP. There's some willingness to do, like they're kind of more comfortable with Chris Bledsoe, because he comes to it from a more religious standpoint, and that makes some of the people in the Air Force who are very religious more comfortable. It doesn't necessarily make Chris more comfortable, though. And nor, I don't think Chris would sit down and tell you that he thought it was Jesus or what he thought, but they're more comfortable with that. And maybe that's actually a good thing, because maybe that'll be a wedge in there for us, because we are the ones who actually do know what's going on, because we have the experience of contact. Like the new book, Fourth Mind, gets into what they are physically, because we've had bodies at Fort Detrick in Maryland for years. And now I don't know if they're still there, because I only heard about them in the early 90s, and only once or twice sort of sub rosa, hey, Whitley, guess what? Bodies of little. And General Exon, Arthur Exon, whom I knew at Wright Field. Marion, could you turn on your mute? You may not realize it, but
Oh,
you
come
brought.
on.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, General Exon says to me years ago. He said that there were bodies, and another relative of mine told me that he had told them that he actually held one of the bodies in his arms. And General Twining told his son that he had had a telepathic conversation with the one that was still alive, and it had told him that they weren't interested in human beings. That is to say, and this should be definitely kept in mind, the first thing they ever said to us was a lie. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
We mustn't forget that. And it's telling us not necessarily that they're evil or demonic, or you don't have to draw conclusions about it, but it is telling us we need to cut the cards here and not go off with our jaws hanging open looking for tech, which is what's happening. A lot of the super wealthy people who are aware of this have been going out and looking for contact and making, they want tech that they can exploit and sell. And that's not wrong. I think if they could find some really good cool tech, it would be helpful. I mean, the way airplanes crash every couple of days, it would be nice if we had some other way of flying, wouldn't it? That was more safe, at least. There's another Delta plane caught on fire again today. And I thought, oh no, another Boeing plane, but this time it's an Airbus. So, and I fly a lot, and you think about it now when you fly. Anyway, so there's nothing wrong with that, but there's so much more here, and that more starts with us, the experiencer community. How do they get into it, Grant? I mean, how do they face the fact that, first of all, they have souls?
Yeah.
And that is the more important thing to the visitors than the bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that aspect. But you did have, like you mentioned, Chris Bledsoe, but you did have some government officials that interacted with you. It's this thing like we have a friend, Mark Olson, and I have had contacts with Tim Taylor. You had contacts with Tim Taylor, who is a fairly high level guy who seems to know what's going on. So there have been people who have looked at you and looked for answers, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Tim and I are friends. And Tim's also had a relationship with Chris. Tim's, as far as I know, is a good guy. He's mostly a launch engineer. He does launches from Edwards of rockets. And I've been with him a few times. We've had some time together, and we get on Signal together and chat every couple of times a year. And he's deep into this and in a lot of different ways. And I'm not sure I'm going to go into too much detail about that because I don't recall him telling me that I could. But yeah.
But he sees it for more like the spiritual aspect. He understands that part of the story as compared to the nuts and bolts, right?
Well, he's beginning to. Yeah, he is. I think he didn't he become a Catholic. I think.
Yeah, I think you. That's what I was going to ask you. Didn't you relay a message from the beings to him?
Yeah, I did. I did relay a message, but I wasn't aware of the fact that it was to become a Catholic.
He did.
Look to his soul. And he was close friends with Diana Pasulka, who is, of course, very strong Catholic. And I think he probably went to her and said, "How do I do that?" And they ended up getting converted to Catholicism, which is one way to do it. I mean, I'm not an opinionated person. As far as I'm concerned, if someone comes to me and says, "Well, I'm a devotee of Kali," or "I'm a devotee of Islam or Christianity," it's all fine with me. The thing is to be a devotee of being a good human being, and that.
So the message was that he had to clean up his life. Wasn't that sort of what the message
Right.
was?
Right. They once indicated to me, this is some years ago, and I say indicated because it's not talking. I can't even describe exactly what it is. You get a kind of, if you ask a question, you get a response, and sometimes it's very clear and sometimes it's not. But I'm very interested in and concerned about what I say. In other words, this is so inexact and indistinct. And yet I'm out here and I'm supposed to be telling stories about what happened and giving people an idea of what this relationship is like. And I don't want to make mistakes. And yet at the same time, it's so fuzzy and hard to focus on. You can't be sure. And I was engaged with them about that. And, they basically were just sort of scornfully explaining, do my best. And I only asked, well, what happens if I lie? And there was a pause because I don't ever lie. I'm very careful about that. I mean, I may tell, the thing is, I may say things that are not true, but if so, it's because I didn't perceive them correctly, not because I'm making it up. And the answer was fascinating. No, I asked it because I had been asked on the show of someone who shall go nameless, who I think lies a lot in public. And I asked about that show. I've asked them about lots of shows that when I'm asked to be on a show, I'll ask them and see what they say. And usually they don't care. They don't say anything, which means they don't care. They said this in relation to that. They said, each lie is like a little bit of lead attached to your soul. And after you die, you cannot remove it. And that really went deep, boy. I thought, whoa, that, and it, makes you examine your life and your conscience. What have I done that's going to weigh me down? And, back at the beginning, this was after I had published Communion, and I know, yeah, I was writing Communion. And someone said to me, well, maybe it was an out-of-body experience. And I thought, what the heck? I don't even know what that is. And he introduced me to Bob Monroe's books, to Journeys Out of the Body. And I got the book, and there was, in the edition I had, there was a method at the end of the book to get out of your body. And I worked at it for a couple nights, and it worked really well. I came rolling right out of my body. And I saw a mask in the window of one of the graves, like an African mask. And I thought, oh, this is cool. I'm going to be able to do this all the time now that I know how. Little did I know that they were in total control of it. And they're basically no way they're going to let a prankster and practical joker and a wise ass like me go out of my body on my own. Anyway, I go out of my body and I go through the wall into the front yard and just have a ball. It was really cool. And I was seeing my body lying there and everything. It was in the bed, and it was just an absolute peak experience. And then, however, I try to get back in my body because I notice when I'm hovering beside my body, I'm slowly going down, not fast, but very slowly. And I have to kind of think about it to get myself back up again. And so I decide, well, I don't want to go down into the ground here, so I'm going to get back in my body. When I try to get back in my body, the interior of my body is like mercury. It's very shiny and silver, and I keep sort of dripping out down the side of the bed. And I thought, oh my God, now I'm in terrible trouble. Anne's going to wake up with a corpse beside her. What the hell have I done here? Darn it, you fool. And so I'm struggling to get back in my body, and all of a sudden, a vision appears. And I wish I could say it was a vision of Jesus or something, but it wasn't. It was a vision of my dad in the front yard mowing the lawn, which I hated to do. And he was always telling me, you need to mow the lawn Saturday morning. And then he would upset me by getting up early and starting to mow it before I got out of bed. And so anyway, he looks up at me and he's mowing the lawn. He says, when are you going to come help me? And I'm back in my body immediately. But it left me thinking, why did I drift down like that? And that became a lifelong journey of self-examination to understand myself and to understand what I have and haven't done, and to embrace the teaching and the key. The master of the key said, sin is what happens. Sin is denial of the right to thrive. And when have I done that to people? In a big way or small way? And, and I thought about, am I not sufficiently compassionate? And Anne was a really moral person, and she knew an awful lot more about it than anyone else I've ever known. And I asked her once, what is compassion? And she says simply, compassion is, she said, she didn't say compassion. She said, Whitley, each of us is all we have. And I look out across this Zoom at all of your faces, and I think each of you in there, that's all you have, just like me. And all of a sudden, everyone becomes incredibly valuable and beautiful. Everyone. This is, and then she was passing out of this world, and it was obvious that she had become enlightened. And I said, Annie, what is enlightenment? And she said, oh, enlightenment's, she was very casual about all this. She was not a guru. Enlightenment's what happens when there's nothing left of us but love. And that's been my journey ever since. From the time I first noticed that I was not the Mr. Saint that I thought, otherwise my body would have presumably been drifting up, down, to now, over this long journey, trying to find the best of me to give to the world. This is, and I think every single one of us, this is the essential thing. And until the people, and circle way back now to the people that people are going after tech and stuff, they got to really revise their whole journey, because they're not going to find out anything unless they are on a serious quest to build a strong soul. Then this will all become more clear to them. It's why I don't think I don't know. I mean, maybe we've got some people say we have a big presence in outer space and on and on, but I'm not in that. And so that's not what I think about. I just feel like the spiritual side of it and the technological side of it and the social side of it are all connected. And it begins with the spiritual journey. That's where we begin our relationship with this thing that they call NIH, non-human intelligence. It's people. It's just different from us. Real different.
Beautifully said. That's that you've taken a different road than me, or maybe the same road, come to the same conclusion I have. I basically tell people, get ready. This is going to be way more spiritual than what you think it is. People have, and more people are coming to the side that realize this consciousness and the spirituality made the whole thing, maybe as Jeffrey Kripal said, it's all ontological. Why would it not be ontological? So
Yeah.
you mentioned Anne. So can we talk a little bit about Anne? The first question I want to ask you is about the book, the idea of communion. Can you tell me because you weren't going to call it communion, you were going to call it something else. Tell that story of how the title came to be.
Okay, well, it was the scariest damn thing that ever happened to me by far. I mean, compared to that abduction, nothing in my life was particularly scary. Nothing. That was seriously scary. And I wanted to call it body terror, because that, to me, it was a very physical level of fear, unlike anything I'd experienced before. My body was terrified in there, in that room. And Annie says all of a sudden one night, lying in the bed beside me, her eyes are closed, and she says, Whitley, you need to call a book Communion, because that's what it's about. incredible statement said back in 1986, long before I had any idea what that meant or what a huge word that actually is, because it's a step beyond contact. It is learning to live with someone else, not necessarily a lovey-dovey thing, but the truth, finding the two of us together, finding our mutual relationship with the truth of being. That's communion. And boy, I mean, that woman had unbelievable insight. You know, one of the old lady visitor said to me that night, she said, "You're the luckiest of the lucky." And I thought, holy God, that has got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard under these circumstances. And I thought, oh yeah, maybe it was because I had this incredible thing happen to me and so forth. Maybe that's what it means. I don't think that's what it meant. I think it meant I had found Anne. That's what it meant.
Wow. Another Anne story I always like to hear you tell is the story where when you started getting this bags full of mail, she decided that she was going to read it all, and she hired a secretary,
Right.
and she comes to you with a message about what this is about. And it's the first time I think anybody mentioned it, this thing about death. Can you describe that story of the
Yeah.
of her going through the mail and relating to this insight that she had as to what's actually going on?
Yeah. She came out of her office one day, which was also our bedroom. I mean, I wish I could say it was a big fancy apartment, but we lived in New York and basically stacked up together, but it was fun. Anyway, she comes out and she says, "Whitley, this has something to do with what we call death." And I thought, what? She said, "Look at this letter." And she showed me one of the letters. I still remember the letter. It was an incredible letter by a woman who was abducted along with her 3-year-old daughter. And the daughter was furious at her after the abduction. And during the abduction, the woman met these people who told her she was a member of their family. And this is another thing. We think of these are aliens, these are nothing to do with us. We're going to find out, and I bet you a lot of y'all have already found out that these aren't aliens at all. These are family. This is family. It's a family affair. And for whatever reason, we got sidetracked somehow, and the families are coming back to gather us into the fold, for better or for worse. Anyway, um, she, the little girl the mother was told that the little girl had a disease that would cause her to die, and that uh, she would not, there was nothing they could do to cure her. And the little girl was furious at her mother inexplicably after the abduction. And then shortly thereafter, she came down with this strange nervous disease of the nerves that's known to medicine, but very rare. And after a while, she died. A friend of the woman in Austin, the woman lived in Houston, or no, the friend was in Austin, excuse me. The friend of the woman living in Houston calls the lady in Austin and says, "I've got to tell you something that just happened, and I'm coming up there. I'm driving." And she says, "Well, wait a minute, you can hardly see." She says, "I don't care. I'm coming right now." It's like the middle of the night. And she gets in her car, and despite the fact that she's legally blind, she manages to drive from Houston to Austin to tell this lady this story. And the story is that two of these visitors, these aliens, so-called aliens, had brought her daughter to her and said, the daughter had said, "Tell my mama that I'm all right." And this was the letter Anne had in her hand. And
Wow.
there were many others. And there were other stories. And then at the cabin, Anne somehow figured out the people who were most likely to have contact. And she would put that letter aside until she had 4 or 5 of those letters. And then she'd call the people or write them and say, "Would you like to come to the cabin?" And we'd have these groups up at the cabin. And damned if the little gray people didn't show up. They would show up. And I know some of those people still to this day, lovely people. And how Anne knew all of this, I don't even know what Anne was. Maybe she wasn't even, maybe she just looked like a woman. But she was cool and she was awfully fun in every way. So if that's what an alien is going to look like, great. Excuse me while I get a little hoarse here. Anyhow, there were many such stories.
Yeah.
And then at the cabin, like, for example, Anne's secretary, Laurie Barnes, the first time she came up to the cabin, she's out a walk in one afternoon and she sees her brother on the road and she talks to him. And she said, "My God, how I'm so glad you've showed up. Come down and meet my friends." And he has disappeared 20 years ago from the face of the earth, and the FBI gave up looking for him. And he says, "I just wanted to let you know that I'm all right." That same message. Whereupon he smiles at her and drifts back into the trees and disappears. And she comes reeling back to the cabin like, "Oh my God." And he says quietly to me, "The Grays will show up here tonight." And sure enough, they did. They showed
Wow.
up and they went from room to room, introducing themselves to anyone as long as it wasn't me. So
Now,
that's, and the dead are
yeah,
this is, you know what this is? This is about reuniting.
yeah.
Communion on another level is about reuniting the living and the dead.
Yeah.
We are going to come into a new level of consciousness. And that is what's happening now. That's what this is really all about.
Yeah. Now, the free survey did 3,200 experiences. They questioned these people and found that a lot of people, as you're telling, encountered dead people on the ship. And that sort of gives people a heads up that if there's dead people on the ship, that they know something we don't know. This is not nuts and bolts. This is something a little more high end. And you, during your initial experience, you had an encounter with a former CIA guy. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, well, I didn't know him when he was in the CIA because I don't know anyone in the, I guess I do probably, but in other words, I don't have any friends who are secretly in the CIA and, yeah, we
Yeah.
get around I'm not into that. But he joined the CIA after college and I didn't see him anymore. But we were friends in college. And the first night, the night of the abduction, I remembered seeing him with these little beings. And I thought to myself afterwards, I did not immediately afterwards, the idea that it was aliens never even crossed my mind. I thought I would been something, I thought it was a criminal assault. And my first step was to call the New York State Criminal Investigation Division and tell them what happened as best I could remember at the time. And they said that there's no evidence. And I didn't mention the guy because I was too, I just, I wanted them to get evidence. I took them out in the woods to where it happened and stuff. And I wasn't even sure it was a nightmare or what it was at the time. And so I certainly didn't want to drag someone into it, into an investigation until I was sure that there was reason to do so. So I kind of kept him on the side. And then time passed and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I decided maybe, I'd written a book called War Day with my buddy Jim Konetka, and it had really pissed off people in the administration, the Reagan administration, for political reasons that I don't even remember. I'm not much into politics. And so I was thinking that maybe I got maybe something was done to me, maybe they drugged me or something, tried to drive me crazy, because there was lots of dirty tricks going on in those days. I probably still are for that matter. But anyway, so I thought maybe, he was in CIA, maybe he knows something, and maybe he was even doing it, because we were friends in college, but we weren't that friendly, and we had our share of battles, as I recall. So I decided I'll call him up and confront him. I phone him, and he's been out of CIA. I have a phone number for him, and I call a number, it's disconnected. So I call his brother, and his brother says, Whitley, he's been dead since last March. And this was like in February of the next year. And I had seen him in December, as big as life. He even told me what turned out to be correct things about problems with the exhaust manifolds of the stealth aircraft, which were extremely secret and under development at the time. And one of them did burn, apparently, because of problems with that exhaust system. And I was floored. I thought, what have I gotten myself into here? There's a dead man and a little bunch of giant bugs, and I'm trying to make out to myself that I am not completely insane. And that was when I started trying to kind of drive Anne away, because I figured, if this happens again and I can't get out of that psychotic state, she's going to be saddled with a husband she can't divorce and a baby she can't support. So maybe we better get separated before it's too late. And it was a hard time. I'll never forget when I finally told her. I talked to Bud Hopkins, who saved my life, by the way, and God bless you, Bud. Even though he got pissed off at me later on, a lot of people get pissed off at me. I don't really care. Anyway, I I thought to myself, when I realized it was real, and I had to talk to Dr. Klein and so forth, I thought, how do I tell Anne now that we've been fighting and I've been trying to get rid of her? Now all of a sudden she's going to have a reason to get rid of me. So I sat down with her, and she's tearing at the edges of her eyes, because she thinks I'm going to say, we really need to get separation. Instead, I say, I think I was taken aboard a flying saucer by little men. She looks at me and she says, not, oh, I want a divorce after all. She says, oh, thank God. Now I don't have to worry about getting a divorce. Yeah, I was married to the right girl for sure.
And she was a very strong character. Talk about the stuff she did. She would do writing, and she is almost like the idea that behind every sort of famous person, there's a woman.
Well, it should not be that way, because
Yeah.
I happen to believe in the equality of men and women.
Yeah.
But in this situation, it turned out like that, especially because in those days, the UFO world was totally male. I mean, there was just a few women in it.
Yeah.
And Anne she was no shrinking flower, believe me. I mean, she was definitely a powerful being, and in her own right. Uh, what exactly did you ask? Have I gotten off the track?
Her role, like her writing and the stuff that she did for you and stuff, all the
Yeah,
way that she supported you all the way. That it
all
wasn't
the
just
way.
you; it was
I
both
mean,
of you.
with the books, especially with communion, she read every word of it, and she would say, Whitley, this and this don't belong in there because you don't know that. You're just assuming it.
Yeah.
Don't make connections that aren't there. Don't try to connect the dots, because this is a mystery, and you have to accept that. Otherwise, don't even write the book. And we went, she was very intense about it, and very, very smart about all of that. And she wrote some wonderful novels of her own. One called An Invisible Woman, which is about a woman who is in late middle age, and she sees a crime, it takes place that her husband is killed by the mafia, and she figures out where the mafia guys are headquartered, and she gets a job in there as a maid, and she's in their offices and stuff, cleaning up their offices, and they don't even see her because she's just some maid, she's just like invisible. And then she wrote an even better novel called Little Town Lies, which is about a serial killer in a small town, and it's a wonderful book. They didn't really get much play, and I've always thought that she was cursed. She should have maybe published them under some other name than Streiber. I don't know, but they didn't get a lot of play, although they were wonderful novels. And she wrote her part of Miraculous Journey, and also after she passed, she participated intensively in the writing of Afterlife Revolution, and then in basically in all, as far as I know, it's still Anne in all of the other books that I have written since then, because I use the implant, which is in my left ear, as a kind of research tool and idea machine, and I think she's on the other end of it, frankly.
You're very psychic. Someone just asked about the implant. So talk a little bit about the implant and tell the message that I love that Anne had sent to you. This message that meant, I don't know if it's meant as much to you as it did to me, where she said, Whitley, I'm no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. This idea that, you could be taking different paths, different lives and stuff like that, which links into the thing. Do you think this is a mission in terms of, are you on a mission where you and Anne picked to do this?
Well, I think we might have been. I'll tell you, I want to start, and I'll try to circle back to this direct question about the implant in a minute. But I love to talk about how I met Anne. Had been living in London as a student, and then I came back to the United States. And I had accepted the fact that in England, the English girls of the 60s did not necessarily wish to hang out with young American males that they knew would be leaving soon. So um, I, uh, I came back and I wanted to get girls, of course, in New York. I moved to New York to become a writer. And my dad he said to me, well, I was supposed to matriculated in London at the London School of Economics, business school. Instead, I went to the London Film School. And he figured that out eventually. And he said, well, now what are you going to do? You're going to go to Hollywood, become a writer or a script writer? You're going to go to New York? I said, no, I'm going to go to New York. I want to become a novelist. He said, oh, I see. That's why you went to film school. No, I went to film school to trick him into letting me stay in London. And it took a while for him to realize I wasn't at LSE. Anyway, he gave me a couple $1,000 and said, okay, this is it. You're on your own. And of course, he's a generous man, and he gave me enough money to last for about a year in those days. And so off I went to New York, and I wanted girls. I wanted girls in my life. I went to singles bars, but Daddy was always saying, do not lie. Never lie. He was just like the visitors, I guess. And so I went to these singles bars, and all the other guys were cool things like doctors and airline pilots and lawyers and CEOs and stuff, even though they looked like 14. And I was a media planner, which is kind of the lowest of the low in the advertising business. And, the guy just sits there crunching numbers. And I'm not going to tell anything like that. I'm not going to tell any untruths. So I'm saying, well, I'm a media planner, and what's that? And they drift away. As soon as I tried to explain what I did, they'd realize it's a clerical job. Their eyes would glaze over, and they would uh, uh, drift over to the next media planner who would say, well, I'm a doctor. So that didn't work out. Also, I'm not the prettiest guy on the block. So that was another problem. I didn't have much to offer superficially, but I thought I had something to offer in here. I saw in the Village Voice a ad for something called Mind Mates. And I thought, well, I'll try that. I want a smart girl. I'd already dated enough to know that I wanted either a wife who was smart as me or smarter, and preferably smarter. Uh, I did not want someone who had to bring up the rear and I'm not a dumb guy. I know that. I'm not ashamed of it. So I figured maybe this is for me. So I sent out my $5 and got this package back with just all like 8 or 10 essays you had to fill out and all kinds of forms. It was amazingly complicated and elaborate. But I filled it all out and sent it in. A few weeks later, I got this list of names. And oddly enough, there were like 5 names, and 4 of them had last names that were either actual fish names or very close. And I'm looking at these names, I'm thinking it's all fish except this one. So I call one of the fish and to see if she's real because it's awfully odd looking list of names. And she is real, but we don't hit it off. And then I say, well, I'm not going to call another one of the fish. I'm going to call this Maddox girl. So I call her. We set up a date, a lunch date. I go to this office on Madison Avenue near where I was working. I walk in, and there's this amazing girl sitting at the reception with big brown eyes. And I think to myself, boy, I hope Ann Maddox looks like this girl because this is a real beautiful girl. I walk up to her and I say, I'm here from Ann Maddox. She looks up and says, I'm Ann. We were not apart for more than 2 weeks for the next 45 years. I knew Wolfen right away. And she was highly intelligent also. And I often understood that Anne could see the macro, bigger stuff better than me. And, she was just the most wonderful companion. And she also had a temper, which I don't have. I don't have a temper. I don't blow up or I haven't been angry maybe 5 times in my whole life. Maybe the visitors, one of the reasons they chose me is they knew I would basically not get pissed off. In any case, Anne got angry a lot, and she would at first, she was an orphan and virtual orphan, and had grown up in a household where she couldn't express herself, and then suddenly she was with this guy who really fell in love with her seriously, and she used to blow up in my face. And after a while, I thought, well, I can understand that. I mean, I've been annoying for all my life. Everyone blew up in my face because I'm a little heedless about sometimes. And so then I realized she can do it. She can have a relationship that includes being angry, and I'm not going anywhere. And after she understood that and we talked it out, she didn't blow up anymore because she realized that she didn't need to. Anyway, let's now go down the road. This marriage becomes incredibly tight, incredibly rich, incredibly close. And life becomes incredibly weird right away also. Let me talk now. I'm going to talk about the implant. I will circle back if you want me to afterwards and talk about some of the fun stories of what Ann and what changed in our lives as soon as we met, because a lot did change and in some very weird and weirdly hilarious ways.
Okay.
Anyway, the implant. May of 1989. It's a warm evening. The windows are open at the cabin. I'm in bed. Ann's in bed beside me. She's asleep. All of a sudden, I hear the crunching of gravel in the shale driveway. I think, my God, and I'm gunned up. I've got a big shotgun under the bed and a pistol in the table beside the bed. Plus, the entire house is surrounded by floodlights. This is not because of the Grays. I at that point was very comfortable with them in my life, and we wanted them to come into the house more, actually. It was because there were possibly other people might be after me and after us. we had our little boy there, and we didn't want to take any risks. So I think to myself, my God, there's no lights. And plus, they got around the gate, which is locked. And that's just not good. And I'm starting to go for the shotgun. And I see, no, I started to go for the floodlights, excuse me. There was a bank of switches beside the bed, which is still there in that cabin. And you could flip them all on at the same time, and the entire house be flooded with light. So I start to go for the floodlights, but as I'm turning, I see a man and woman standing at the foot of the bed, just as big as life. And the alarm system is not tripped. The red LED is on. And so they run toward me, and I forget the lights. I'm going for the gun now. But the next thing I know, I'm lying on my right side. I would have had to gone down on my left side to go for the gun, which was under the bed, and I was on the left side. I'm lying on my right. I cannot move. I cannot see. I hear the woman's voice speaking gently into my ear, and someone, I guess the man, is pressing my head down hard into the pillow, just pressing it like in waves, like this, pressing it. And then there's a crash and a flash, and they're gone. The sound of crashing in the woods, like people are running through the woods. And I get up, I get the pistol, and I run out of the LED is still red. I run out of that bedroom. I run and go through the whole house. I went through the basement and the attic and the whole house. And there was no broken in sign of any break-in. It was all quiet. And I finally ended up sitting on the bedside thinking, I need to figure out more. I need to get more serious about what a lucid dream is, because this is out of this. That then the next morning it became obvious when I went out to get the paper. The garage door was wide open, even though the alarm system was still on. So I call the alarm guy, and he finds this intense magnetic field around the switches that he can't explain, because he says our switches don't have a magnetic field like this. So all he can do is replace the switches. Then a couple days later, my ear hurts. I feel this little thing in there. And so I'm telling Ann, I knew Roger Lear at the time. We'd been in California at some implant removal, so we knew all about it. It was not a secret at that point in our lives. And I said, I think I've got an implant, and I want to get to take it out. Annie, being Annie, she says, why do you want to take it out? I said, because I don't want to be tracked. She said, nobody cares that you go down and get the newspaper every day, or every once in a while go out and buy some groceries or something. If anyone's interested in tracking you, they will not be interested in this in a week or so. So just leave it in. We want to find out what it's really about. Luckiest damn thing I ever heard. A few years later, we're living in Texas, and I meet a doctor, and we're having dinner together, and he's not mentioned community. That hasn't come up. It's a social gathering. I say, by the way, I've got this little thing. Could you feel this in my ear? And Ann's face is sort of darkening. And he touches it, and he says, oh yeah, that's a little cyst. You want me to take it out? I said, yeah, knowing I have outmaneuvered her. He says, well, come over tomorrow morning. The next day was Saturday, to my office. I'll pop it right out. That began another saga. And I'm not using a green screen, by the way, just so you know. Maybe you're talking about Grant. I don't have the capability of doing that. So anyway, Grant, yeah, okay. God knows where he really is then. Be anywhere, probably in a UFO. Anyway, it moves when he touches it with the scalpel down into my earlobe. He freaks out and pulls out. And 2 days later, my ear starts burning like hell, and it moves back up to where it is to this day. And Annie says, I had promised her that I would only try that one time. And she already knew. You can hear it in her voice in the video of this, that it wasn't going to work. So she was letting me do my thing. So then she passes on, and a slit appears in my right eye. And I see words starting to pass through it very quickly. My writing improves dramatically. And one day I'm walking across the street down here at the street corner, and it's bright sunny day, and I'm seeing this slit, and the words are racing past like they're typed at blinding speed. And I say, who are you? And this word slow down, and it says very clearly, it's me, and then they speed up again. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe she knew it from the beginning. That's why she didn't want it taken out, because she knew that it would help, because it's really working somehow. I don't know how. Then a doctor who's associated with the intelligence community enters my life and wants to get a CT scan of the implant. And so I tell my GP, he says, you want a CT scan of your ear? Well, this doctor is going to call you. And yes, he'll explain it. A couple of days later, my doctor calls, not his nurse, but the doctor himself calls, Whitley, this is doctor. Listen, it's all arranged. You go to the such and such place, and they'll take the CT scan of your ear. Obviously, it really got talked into it. So I go in to get the CT scan of my ear, and it turns out beautiful. It's a perfectly beautiful CT scan. Shows the thing very clearly right there. And but before that happened, 2 days before, there came a knock at the door at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, this is not a normal knock, and I'm not going to demonstrate it. And I don't think anyone could even do it. And I've heard it a few times, and it means that there's going to be a physical contact experience of some sort. And I answer the door because I know that I'm not going to not answer that. And there's two men there. One of them seems vaguely familiar to me. The other one is not. I think they asked if the man, the first one, the second one never talked. The first one asks if they can come in. He says, I would like to talk to you about the implant. And he explains how it works. He says it draws memories, remembered things up from your unconscious and draws them into your conscious mind. And it works by relating what you have forgotten in the past to what you were trying to think about now in order to expand basically expand your intellect. And he says, you do not want it removed. And I said, no, I don't. He said, so don't let them talk you into that. I said, don't worry, I wouldn't let them talk me into it anyway. And then he says it was designed by a man named Konstantin Rodive. And they leave. And of course, I don't immediately recognize the name. And I spell it out and put it in Google. This is before AI.
Yeah.
And it comes out that he was Konstantin Rodive, who was the world's leading expert on electronic communication between the living and the dead.
Wow.
And it appears that he designed this from the other side.
Wow.
This gets back to where we were when you first asked the question about the dead, because this is what it's really about. The visitors, the aliens, are just go-betweens. They're here to connect us and reconnect this species, which is broken. The connection between us and our dead has been severed. And I go into the why in the fourth mind. It's nobody's fault, and it wasn't done by some evil entity. It was just a random natural disaster that happened. And we can get back together again. And I think that the visitors are midwives to the birth of a new mankind, and the new man in the new mankind, the living and the dead are one.
Wow. Is that how you wrote the book with Anne, about the afterlife?
I've written them, yeah. Oh yeah, I wrote the after. I could get her to talk to me then much more easily than now, because she's it's not the same. In the first 5 years after she passed, there was a lot of communication, not only with me, but with lots of other people, direct communication. But, as time passes, things change. And, I'm supposed to do more on my own now, although the implant still works extremely well. I don't get too much physical touching unless certain things happen, such as I go to sleep, I fall asleep during a meeting, then she will wake me up every time. Um, she loved kids movies, which I found boring. She used to take our son, to the movies all the time with his friends, and we go to these movies. It just caused my eyes to roll back in my head, with all these little creatures jumping around on the screen. Nothing of interest to me. So anyway, I'm now the taking my grandkids to movies like that.
Wow.
And we went to a movie called Sonic the Hedgehog, which was completely boring to me, but not apparently to Anne, because what happens is, just to explain, when she wants to wake me up or energize me or tell me to do something, there's a vibration that occurs along my lower legs. And I tried to figure out, why not higher? And then the answer was very clear, because you're not to touch. And if I come into you any higher than that, you will touch. I said, I won't touch. She said, you will touch. And she's, of course, right. I will touch. I would try to touch her if she's touchable. And she may be, because otherwise, why would she do it that way? Anyway, this vibration is very, very pleasant. It's energizing as hell. It sends a wonderful energy through my body every time it happens. And uh, she so we're watching the movie, and I nod off, and I swear to God, I was nearly electrocuted. Bzzz, my legs, you never felt anything like it. I jump up out of the seat. Oh my God, I yelled in the middle of the theater. And I realized Anne's watching the movie through my eyes. She does not want to miss a single second of it. And she said, midway during the life of our marriage, she said, Whitley, you're not allowed to choose the movie anymore, because you choose movies that are depressing, long, and boring every time. I'm choosing the movies from now on. And she did. And now she's passed on, and I'm choosing the movies again. I almost always go to movies that are depressing, long, and boring. I've said to Anne, will you please give me some sign so I can finally go to a movie that I enjoy? And so far that hasn't happened. But
Wonderful. So that's your method of communication, like in terms of the beings. How do you interact with them, and how often does it happen? Does it happen as
oh
much
well,
now as it did in the beginning?
I wish it would be an easy thing to explain in a way that makes coherent sense. But the primary communication method is, and this is, we got to face the fact that whatever this is, it's going to be extremely strange. And I don't know if this would be true of other people or not. They hang a glowing strip of hieroglyphics in my bedroom window in the night. And when I see it, I don't any idea in my intelligence what they mean, but they mean something to me, because they form then into ideas that are usually related to my books. And that doesn't really happen except when I'm uh, uh, when I'm writing. That's the primary means. And then there's also the implant itself, which is very involved in my writing, but I think that's mostly Anne. I don't think it's uh, non-human intelligence. I think it's Anne. And I think the non-human part of it is these strange hieroglyphics. And, they're too complicated for me to, I've thought, well, maybe if I trace them out, I could get somewhere with maybe find someone else who's seen this. But they're so complicated, and they might not even be, they might just look like that. That might be what my mind is telling me they are. There might be something not even in the window, but inside me. Although I will say this, I was with a friend who's deeply into this in New York, and spending time in their apartment for the first time. And I was in the back bedroom, and they had their apartment bedroom looked out over a big swathe of the city, a beautiful apartment. And I woke up, and these huge uh, strips of these hieroglyphics were hanging from the building across the way. I was just extraordinary. And I got my phone and I took a picture of them. And the picture didn't come out. You don't see the hieroglyphics, but they're sort of an orange red color. And the entire frame of the picture is this orange red color. And it wouldn't have been like that if they hadn't been there. It would have been when an iPhone is good at taking pictures in the dark, and it's New York, so it wasn't all that dark even. There's a lot of city lights. It would have shown the buildings for sure. So definitely something was there, at least that I know. But this is the way they communicate with me, the main way. And then the implant is the other way, and maybe it's them to some extent, but as I said, I think it's Anne.
Now, I've just got a couple more questions because we have a lot of people and they were putting a lot of questions on here. So I'm going to sort of pass it to Desta. I have a question about your initial, let's start with this way. You and I have been in this a long time, and there's a lot of people who are new, who've only been around for a little while. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that this is not the same world as it was when you got into the field and I got in? Like, I never would have believed any of the stuff that's happening now. Can you talk about that, how complex the situation is? That I think you've got the same opinion, that the more you look at it, the more complex it gets and the more awe and curiosity that arises in you. This is not a mystery we're going to solve anytime soon.
No, you never would have written UFO Sky Pilots early on either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but anyway, which is a great book, folks. If you have not read UFO Sky Pilots, first thing you do as soon as you hang up is get a copy of it. It's essential reading. And you're liable to find something in your own life that fits into it. And she's written a lot of other good books too. Don't forget that. And in any case, when I first started, there was Bud and hostility. That was it. Those are the two things. And Bud was not very well liked in the community either. But then Bud and I had a falling out, or I should say Bud had a falling out with me. And so I was really left, not only was the whole community against me, Bud turned against me and was writing these white papers about me and how I was a complete schmuck and all this stuff. He never, to his credit, said that I was not telling the truth, because he knew that was not the case. But I'll tell you why he got mad at me, and I can't really blame him, but it wasn't my fault. We were going to publish our books, him, Intruders, and me, Communion, at the same time. And we had plans, which were fantasies. We didn't know that, though, of going out on tour together and everything. And I sent him, my publisher gave me a publication date. And so I wrote him a letter. In those days, you could write someone a letter and they would, mail it, and it would be there the next day. Or if you wrote it early enough in the day, it'd be there that afternoon. Those times have changed. In any case, I wrote this letter laying out all of the publication times and all the details so that we could coordinate, and he could coordinate this with his publisher. What I didn't know was the letter, the publisher for reasons that I have never been able to fathom, was lying to me. And they published the book. As it turned out, Bud gets the letter and is actually reading the letter when his editor calls and says, Whitley book has just been published. It's in every store in the country. And Bud felt betrayed, which was true, but not by me. It was by my publisher, and he would never believe that. He could never accept that. And the friendship ended, and it never restarted again. So then without Bud, I basically ended up in a situation where I'm going out on an author tour, ultimately hostile author tour, trying to tell people I was taken aboard a flying saucer by aliens at a time when there's just no way that could happen. It was totally no way. And boy, I I was dancing on the end of the plank for 2 years because that author tour went on and on and on because the media thought it was nonsense. The bookstore people thought it was nonsense. But people just like you guys read the book and told their friends. And despite everything, very quietly in their minds and hearts and memories, contact began because they saw the cover and they saw the face and they thought, my God, it wasn't a dream. And that is the beginning of mankind's next step into the cosmos. That
And you've now read the book, right? You've got an audio version where you actually read the book.
Oh yeah, I've got audio versions of yeah, I became my own publisher um, because the publishers never, they were okay with me when I was selling a lot of books. But when that died down, their true feelings emerged. Contempt. And I can do it. I'm a good marketing guy, and I'm also love to make covers and stuff. And I love the feel of all of it, and the writing and the reading, and I love to be in the whole process. So yeah, I have audiobooks of Communion, Them, Jesus: A New Vision, uh, uh, Afterlife Revolution, and Fourth Mind.
Wow,
All of those are in audio and Audible.
beautiful. Okay, my last question is one that it has to do with, you probably have heard this idea. Brandon Fugel brings it up about Skinwalker Ranch, that when you go onto the ranch, make sure your mind is in the right mood or whatever. Otherwise, it's going to be a bad experience. In terms of your book, Communion, you were writing horror novels before that occurred. Do you think that had anything to do with your type of experience as opposed to Chris Bledsoe, who was a deacon in the Pentecostal church who didn't get the sort of the dramatic terror incident that you got? Do you think that your writing before Communion had anything to do with the type of experience you had?
Well, first, I think if we see this through a religious lens, we're not going to really get very far. Second, they knew they could come to me as they were because I would I was fascinated by fear. I was entertained by fear. And they knew that, obviously. So it's a very interesting question, though. And I think that we have the challenge of trying to see this in a new way and not through the lenses that we have seen it through from time immemorial throughout all of our history. We always turn these people into gods and demons and whatnot. But when you take all of that away, what you find are very brilliant little people who are scared and often tired and kind of not very clean. And despite the fact that they are not human, they are deeply human in their hearts. And they've come to us many times over our history in different forms, in different ways. And each time we have pushed them away by making them into gods, and they've left and come back again. Now maybe this is our last chance to see them and engage with them as they really are, so that they can actually interact with us. I think that there is an element of danger here. I do not think that they are necessarily all sweetness and light. Thank you, Nicole, for scaring Jesus out of me with your I just glanced at that. Oh my God. Anyway, that's cool. I see that's immediately my reaction. That's cool. I'm still entertained by fear. I saw a scary as hell movie last night and enjoyed it thoroughly. It was called Sinners. And it's about uh, some people who seem to be hillbilly musicians or blues singers and stuff in the Mississippi Delta in the 1930s, but they turn out to be vampires and everybody gets very upset. So maybe seeing this as it is going to be hard. Seeing it through the lens of glory and sentiment is going to be easy, but it's not going to be true. We need to see it as it is. And also we will see ourselves as we are at the same time.
Yeah. Almost like the participatory universe that John Wheeler talked about. It's a participatory universe that we are part of the mystery that we're engaging, that we reflect different things, and they're picking us for whatever talents we have or ideas we have to get the idea out and raise the consciousness through this communion.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Because we have to interact with them as close to what they are as we can, and to see what they really are. There's a chance maybe that we could have a relationship that worked and was productive. And I mean, there's a reason that all these years that they've been coming here and we've been seeing them as gods, that we're still sitting here, not off the planet. We haven't passed the test.
Yeah. Or evil aliens. Now the big thing is evil aliens, that they're the new threat.
They ain't pretty, and they're not very nice. They're not, I would definitely not like to be a diplomat on their planet. And if they have a planet. And yeah, there's the evil alien thing, the demons, and then there's the gods and all of that stuff. That's all in us.
Yeah.
All inside us.
Yeah.
As I said before, I do think that they can be quite dangerous. I don't think there's any question of that. I think we've got to really going to have to work to hold our own, but I think we can.
Beautiful. Okay, Desta, are you there? Desta is one of you had Anne. I've got Desta. She's behind me. She doesn't really stick out. She's written now. I think she said she couldn't write a book. Now she's like talking about 17 books coming. She's one of the few people I know that, you have all these collections of books that you follow just have and you don't read any of them. She's read them all. So Desta is supposed to be watching the questions. Desta, you want to get on here and ask a couple of questions that people are putting out? Desta.
Have I put her to sleep?
No, I think she wants to stay in the background, but can you get a hold of her, Mark, here? Is she?
Yeah, I just sent her.
Yeah, Desta.
Connect your mic, Desta. Sometime you'll have to have Desta on your show. She's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely one of the people. We had her on our last meeting, and she was spectacular and well received, and lots of great comments on her appearance.
Oh, wonderful!
Hello.
There she is.
There you are.
She is.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was screwing around with these new headphones and it all changed. Okay, sorry. I was going to just start reading from the very beginning of the chat here. I'm going to turn my camera on. So Vincent says, I recently watched the film Constantine, and in the film, there's a line that says, it's not enough to know, you have to believe. That struck me as deeply relevant to the experiencer journey. After contact, the paradigm breaks. We no longer believe, we know. But knowing doesn't mean I believe anyone will ever understand what these experiencers did to me, or that disclosure will ever come. knowing can be isolating, even traumatizing, because it shatters the world as we understood it. How do we find peace in a reality that most still deny? And how do we live meaningfully in a paradigm that no longer fits?
Well, that's a really complicated stack of questions. I would like to begin by quoting Anne. She once said, "The human species is too young to have beliefs. What we need are good questions." And I think that really speaks to this question, because how do we find the questions instead of believing anything? How do we step way back from this and say, well, maybe they're not what they seem. Maybe we're not what we seem. Maybe it's all different. And how do we come to a conclusion, but how do we explore that space within ourselves and in the world around us with really good questions? And what does a good question do? A good question opens the mind, and it takes you to a place of knowing that isn't also a place of believing. And I think the question addresses that very beautifully. And I think that I don't want to go any more down that path, because I think I have approached the question as clearly and meaningful as I can by not answering it directly.
Perfect. Okay, the next one is Whitley, you were once asked about Stockholm Syndrome in relation to the difficult experiences many contactees initially go through and how those experiences can eventually be perceived as positive. As someone who hasn't had contact myself, I find it hard to grasp how something so distressing can later be seen as meaningful or even transformative. How do such challenging encounters evolve into something positive over time? It seems so contradictory from the outside.
Well, you know what an initiatory experience is. It's an experience that turns your life upside down and forces you to see the world in a new way. It doesn't have to be fun and pleasant. In fact, usually such experiences aren't. There are, someone who knows a lot about this and speaks very eloquently about it is Jeff Kripal. You might have him on here sometime if he wants to come. In any case, initiation, whether they were initiating me or not, I don't know, and I don't care. I was initiated by them because my world blew up in my face and a new world emerged. I cannot characterize them as angels or demons or anything like that. All I can say is I decided at one point, I am going to get out of this what I can. And I'm not going to sit in my room and pout because they beat me up. And say that, no, you can't have anything to do with my life because what you did was wrong. It was wrong. And you know what? I still am curious about them, and my curiosity is stronger than my fear or my revulsion, which is both of those things were there. I am curious. I want to know more, and I want to figure out how to get out of this relationship something that's good for me and good for us. That's where I am, and I'm not going to walk away from it.
Thanks, sir. Next one is from Daniel, and he wants to know, with some of the billionaire class pushing for disclosure, are we seeing the clear picture, or are we to trust the visitor's process?
I definitely would not trust the visitor's process in any way whatsoever. And as far as disclosure is concerned, what does it mean? I think that I don't think that the government is in control of disclosure. I think the visitors are. I think that those of us in the close encounter community might be more in control of it than we realize. Because one thing that has happened because they hang back is that there's been no cultural colonization. And that means that cultural colonization is what happens when usually a technologically superior culture encounters a technologically inferior culture. And the inferior culture is destroyed by the superior culture, either physically, as happened in Mesoamerica and Peru when the Spaniards showed up, or more deeper in a deeper way when the U.S. Air Force showed up on New Guinea, and people started seeing airplanes land and all kinds of wonderful things coming out of them. And they decided to try to do that too. And so they made bamboo airplanes and created runways in the woods that looked to them like runways, and bamboo refrigerators. And they would move back and forth between the bamboo airplane and the bamboo refrigerator, making noises that sounded to them like what the airmen were saying when they walked back and forth unloading the planes for the soldiers' provisions. And then they'd open the refrigerators and there'd be nothing there. Basically, what our government has been doing behind the scenes is spending a lot of money doing all these years. It's been building bamboo airplanes and refrigerators and walking back and forth between them and opening the refrigerator doors and finding nothing there. That's why we're not flying around in flying saucers right now. We have to go deeper. We have to get beyond that. We have to understand that one of the oldest admonitions in the world is know thyself. It comes from way back when. It was carved on the temple at Delphi. It was mentioned by Pythagoras. Probably comes from the deepest past. Without that journey, the journey toward the visitors and therefore also towards the stars is never going to happen. So, where did I start? Anyone have any idea? I kind of got off the track. I got sidetracked by the interesting depths and resonance of the question. I hope I gave enough of an answer.
That was a good answer.
Good.
The next one I think is ours. Do you believe that the visitors exist in a parallel dimension, or are they native to a different aspect of our shared reality, as in behind the veil, or like where do you think they actually are literally coming from?
Okay, well, I would like to thank all of you for asking such simple, straightforward questions. And I can only respond to that with story. And I'm not going to be able to offer an opinion because I have no opinion. I can only give you story. And here is a story. I was on the Lakota Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, Pine Ridge, in the year before COVID. I guess it was 2017. And this incredible thing happened to me. Over 3 days, every time I closed my eyes, I saw another version of the world all around me, just almost as clear as if my eyes were open. It was amazing and absolutely, completely detailed in every way, and not this world. It was like if you can imagine what the world would have been like in the Ice Age before the ice had melted, when it was still cold, like the little streams on the reservation were wide brooks, and the reservation has a highway built by the Bureau of Indian Affairs that's built up. But in the other level of the other world, it's still just a wagon track. And the result was when my eyes were closed in a car and we were going down the wagon track, when the wagon track headed off down the hill, it felt like the car was flying, and it was so convincing that I would lose my stomach. That feeling of going up real fast would happen. And that was no that was no hallucination or no, it was not in my head. There was something coming into my head from outside. And another thing happened there that was really weird. And that is that I was looking down I was at the Wounded Knee Memorial, and I was looking down over the graves of the people who were murdered, and I was giving a prayer for them and thinking how I would like to, in some way, offer some sort of help or comfort. And this man kept walking up to me and standing there and then walking back and walking up. And finally he said, "Mr. Streiber, when I stand beside you, I can see down into the graves. I can see the bones. But when I step back, it's just the ground." And I thought, how weird, because I'm just seeing the ground. I'm not, apparently it's whatever's happening to me is catching. Then I was at a Sundance, which is a beautiful, extraordinary, and one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. I don't want to talk about it too much because they're private family affairs, the real ones. And I was privileged to be able to be there. A UFO showed up over the Sundance that the chiefs were saying, "Oh, it's a FBI drone," but it started to shoot out these lights, and they shut up because obviously it's not an FBI drone. And then somebody said, "Well, it's Whitley's people." And anyway, that was there. And then when I closed my eyes at the Sundancers chanting at the Sundance and the arbor it's in and stuff, and the chanting would go off to the side down the hill because the Sundance in the other world was taking place in another spot nearby. It wasn't the same spot. It was just astonishing, the whole thing. And I got into this. I did research into it. And it turns out that and this research is all detailed in A New World, my book, A New World. And it comes down to that there's a lot of solid physics, not necessarily for parallel universes, but for the idea that there could be a mirror universe. There almost has to be, apparently. So I think it's a real place. Now, fast forward a few weeks, and of course I come back here and I want to get into it again. I'm after this. I'm on this. And I'm found out, I go down to the bluff here in Santa Monica and sit in the sun and I can see it clearly. And I've been doing this now for years, and it's just a lovely experience. But there was a problem. The problem is this. I woke up one morning and I was suddenly riding a bicycle down a road in another world, physically. And it was not my bicycle. And I was in this mirror universe. And that went on, and I tried a number of times to get into it, both here and in Texas, where the old family home, there's a lot of stuff like that can go on. And there was resistance to me. I was not wanted. And I have a tendency to try her even harder. If I'm told you don't belong here, I have a tendency to try harder to get there. And the next thing I knew, I got into trouble with them, and I ended up partially blind in my right eye. And they confronted me, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. I'm not going to get into it too deeply. But I do think there's at least one parallel universe, and that somebody comes out of it sometimes if you get them pissed off enough. And there were also non-human beings in it. It was both human and non-human beings living together, as far as I could tell. I do not see people in it much. When I see it here, it's always an empty place. It's pretty much the same place every time, and I rarely see individuals. I've seen some buildings, and there are some buildings I see, but I don't see people. And when I was on Pine Ridge, where I think there were people, I would see these like flashes, and there's something about, it's like if you try to get into that universe, you sort of shorts out. It's not supposed to happen. And if it is a mirror universe, it means we're all there in some way too. And you don't want both halves of a person to end up in the same place, I guess, or something. I mean, I don't know enough about it, except to say that if you try too hard to fool around with it, you get in trouble.
Good answer. The next one is from us too. It says, what are do you think the visitors are harvesting something from us, like energy or memory or emotion, or is the relationship more symbiotic?
Well, they're obviously harvesting sexual material because they harvested it from me. And, there's women probably in this group who've had eggs taken from them, probably men who've had semen taken from them. It's taken from me. I experienced this very vividly, and it was not a pleasant experience at all. If you hear on the hypnosis tape, the second time with Klein, you hear me say, why have I got an erection? And it's a good question considering where I was and what I was seeing. And it turned out that they had put something in my rectum that caused the nerves that are involved in that to turn on, and they took this from my body. They took me, my children from me. And they did that to lots of people through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and into the early 2000s. What did that mean? Where are the children? Are there children? Someone's got a lot to answer for. I'll tell you why I say that. It's for two reasons. First of all, they should not have done that without asking us and then telling us what they were doing. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they don't know how to do that. I don't know. And second, I know the government knew a lot about this then, because while I was working on communion, word apparently got around from Stanton Friedman, whom I was asking for help for research. And we had a man come into our lives called David W. Webb. And if you go into Wikipedia to David W. Webb, don't do David Webb, you'll get someone different. You'll find that he was a space scientist, a very prominent space scientist, and consulted with every alphabet agency there was. And he came to the cabin. In fact, if you look in the frontispiece of communion, you'll see it's partly dedicated to him because he was so helpful to us and so important to us. He was a very kind man, and he helped us get an allergist, and they gave us epinephrine injectors to keep around the house because there were serious allergic reactions when these little characters would touch you. If they didn't suppress it, I mean, obviously they could suppress it, but they not necessarily would. And he would come to the cabin. He met us in the city, and he was very encouraging. He said, Whitley, keep trying. Don't give up. Keep trying, and be sure and write about it, and tell the world. So they know. They know. They knew then. But how do they come out and say, we know all these people have been abducted and sexual material has been taken from their bodies, and we just sat back and made them laughing, used social engineering techniques to make them into laughingstocks? How do they explain themselves? The visitors are very clever, and they have made sure that the government is going to keep their secrets for them. Believe me. And, I see all this stuff about disclosure, and I think to myself, I am wondering if that'll ever happen. I think that it's quite possible that in the context of disclosure, they will do something to disempower the close encounter witnesses, because we are a thorn in their sides. they don't want us around. And my concern is that they will debunk us. And I see how religiously the media follows along anything what Leslie and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal did in the New York Times was so extremely unusual. It was not, they can't do anything anymore. And it was just a one-off. But mostly the media follows what the government says religiously on this subject. And if the media says, the government says, well, we're going to disclose all of this and it's all true and there are aliens here, but these people who are running around saying they were abducted, they're just a bunch of nuts. The media will leap on that immediately. They won't even need proof. They won't even need proof. They will throw us under the bus instantly. Every single one of us. Every one of us. That's where we are. And speaking of which, I've got until 7 o'clock. I don't know when you plan to end, but that's when I got to stop.
We close at 7 o'clock your time, Whitney.
Oh, good.
Whitley.
Perfect. I'm so glad because that way I won't have to leave until everyone.
By the way, well, I have a second here. In the chat, both Whitley's and Grant's information's in there for where you can get their books. So they're all on Amazon. So if you feel the motion, please help these people out and buy some of their books.
And Whitley, you can talk about your podcast, which I've been on a couple times, which is you got some phenomenal interviews that you do. Talk a little bit about your podcast.
Okay, well, first of all, the books, both of us write books that will help you. You'll never be the same if you make the insane choice to read these books. Well, my podcast, yeah, Dreamland has been going since 1998 when it started out. Ramona and Art Bell started it in 1998 on Saturday nights, and midway through the year, they decided they wanted their Saturday nights back and called me, and Art called me and said, "You want to do the Saturday night show?" And I said, "Sure." So I started doing Dreamland on Clear Channel radio, and it lasted about a year and a half. And then the things were changing rapidly in the radio world, and they dropped it. And I figured out how to stream it on the internet. It was maybe it was even the first podcast. It was certainly one of the first. And I've been interviewing people every week on Dreamland ever since. The latest interview is really a fascinating one. It's with a religious man, and it's basically the question is, will ET end religion? And he's a very thoughtful man, a priest, a preacher rather. And so it's this is what I do. I do that every week. And that's Dreamland. That's my show. You can get it on, you can go to at Whitley Streiber Dreamland on YouTube and get it there. You can get it on my site, unknowncountry.com. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, pretty much anywhere. And I've been doing it a long time. If you want to subscribe to my site, then you can delve into all of the shows in the past, including shows with Grant when he sounded like a boy, and I did too.
It's a wonderful podcast and fascinating guests over all the years of you. Probably everybody except the one that you had trouble was the latest disclosure guys who don't want anything to do with you, correct?
Oh no, they won't talk to me.
Yeah.
David Grush and Lou Elizondo and all of those guys, they're not gonna get into the woo people, as they call us. They want to they're serious, and this is serious business. And I think that waiting in the wings that they are all planning in all likelihood, to say eventually, to let the government say this, what I said earlier, that this is all nonsense and we might as well go to hell.
Well, you're welcome here because a lot of the people I'm sure, and I know, are experiencers, and I think you've helped them greatly in terms of being able to ask you a question or two and hearing you validate their experience, because you know what it's like. People are walking around and they feel alone. They end up getting divorced. Nobody will believe them. And so I always say that your book changed all that in terms of giving a voice to the people who are the ones that you got to listen to, because you can look at the lights in the sky from now till eternity or another 80 years. You're just totally wasting your time. You got to talk to the people who are interacting with the intelligence.
Yeah, and let's hope that the people, the sort of semi-official people who are running around out there, get used to us instead of rejecting us, and that they embrace the reality of this, and we are at the center of that reality. That's the truth.
Beautiful.
It's us.
Mark, do you want to close it off?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I was lucky enough to watch Whitney in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, and also in Sedona at the MUFON meetings. And he's Whitley is such a gracious, humble person, and in Phoenix, he lost his computer like you did, Grant. I'm trying to think of the one where you were doing the music thing, and you couldn't get your computer to work. The same thing happened to him in Phoenix, and he spoke for an hour and a half without any kind of notes and everything else. Very engaging. We're incredibly lucky to have both of you come here tonight and share some time with us. We know how valuable this is. This group started, Grant, as a healing group, and it's grown into much more. It's a learning group now, and these kind of guests and with people like you, Grant, still associated with us. We're very lucky to have both of you. And all I can say is thank you. And I know everyone in this. We actually had 100 people in our drawers today, which has never happened before for a single meeting. I'm sure it'll be many watches on the YouTube. So, but anyways, I'm just so thankful, and I want to say to Whitley that I can pronounce your name again, and I'm going to be able to. I'm going to be able to talk more. That I spent 2 hours with him in the car coming back from Sedona, and it was just a treasure of mine from that moment on. And Grant, thank you again for coming in and being our guest interviewer tonight. I know Whitley has probably enjoyed that as well.
Yeah,
thanks for the opportunity.
I love both of you guys, and I think being interviewed by Grant is a great pleasure.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for showing up.
Beautiful.
Thank
you, Whitley.
That's what we have to do. Good night now.
Whitley, thank you again.